software, and what we're doing is inviting in our lunchtime series of seminars, we're inviting various industry figures to talk about the industry. We talk and topical issues and so on, and we talk for an hour. Try not to turn it into a sales pitch. Try not to turn it into death by PowerPoint either. And Jason, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Jay Redmond. I'm the sales director here at BAT Software. I've been here for just over a year, and dealing with lots of lovely new and existing clients over the last 12 months to really push out what we're doing and build up the brand a bit. But otherwise, we're going into new territories every day, it seems, and it's very interesting. Yes, I should hand over to Tom to introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you, Charlie. Thanks, Jason, for inviting me on here. So Tom Rawlings, I'm one of the directors of Monenti Partners, and we've worked with Charlie for goodness many years. I'm chartered financial planner, still actively looking after clients. I've been chartered for about a decade, and over the course of the last 6 or 7 years, been involved in some acquisitions into our business. So really, this is a first-hand view of how we've done it. That's not necessarily the right way or the wrong way, but hopefully it gives people an idea of how smaller IFAs are looked at and how they can be integrated into businesses successfully. Some things that look good and some things obviously don't look so good. So hopefully we can share that with you today.
Perfect. So yeah, as you can see from the title, I'll be the host today, and we do like to run a semi-interactive webinar. So do feel free to put your hands up to ask a question. Otherwise, try and reduce the background noise. It's always interesting if the dog's barking, but it's best to keep them muted for a while. So just going forward, we've got for our discussion. So the format today, as I say, is fairly open. Tom is very much the expert on the M&A, the acquisition trail. So if you want to load questions into the chat, we can then ask those at the relevant time, or keep your questions to the end if you want to. There is a Q&A section. I think we've already got some. And I just wanted to point this out really as a fact that during the research that, well, in the current 12 months, in the previous 12 months, it's been a record year for acquisitions. So there's been 140 UK advice firms acquired, and that is a mixture of obviously PE backed and privately done. So I know Tom's going to talk us through a little bit about that and the differences. And again, whether you're coming at this from either the angle of being an acquiree or an acquirer, if that's the right way to put it, we should be trying to cover off both sections for you. And obviously, what I would say is obviously BAT are not certainly not the experts on the process, but we provide technology, data capture, data management, etc., for predominantly compliance for UK advice firms of any nature and any size. So we're looking at what we can do to help with the proposition or the preparation, which needs to happen probably sooner rather than later, depending on where you are in the journey. And this has been a critical feature, really, and something, again, Tom is going to go into great depth, and I'm sure, but the valuations for any acquisition these days are not just built on the revenue or the recurring income of the firm. You are now looking increasing at the operational maturity, everything from compliance control in terms of SMCR through to complaints, through to breaches, everything really, just to show the quality of your processes and the quality of your data will align to that, hopefully. And that's very much where the FCA are going. Their new 5-year plan is AI embracing, and it is exceptionally data led. And so therefore something we talk about regularly is that if you can't show it with data, you can't show control of the firm. So this actually satisfies both parties in terms of looking at M&A and the FCA going forward. Data control and depth of data, quality of data, etc., is going to be critical.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, at IFA, the compliance consultancy we've seen several firms being basically phone up and say, I've just sold the business, thank you very much, and goodbye, and then phoning up a week later and saying, oh, we've just failed the due diligence. And what's and could we continue with you? And what's happening is that the firms the counterparty regulation And so really acquirers are looking forensically. I mean, when I was last doing it 10, 15, 20 years ago, really all you needed to know was an interview with the person. You need the new business book, the PI submission form, and the accounts, and really you had everything you needed to know to buy a business. But those days are for the birds now, and it's forensic. It's Tom will talk about this in more detail, and so that all comes at the end of the when a business life comes to its end, and they want to know absolutely everything about your business. So you have to prepare now for what people are going to ask about now in 5 years' time, so to speak, or 10 years' time, looking back on today.
Absolutely. And I think the overriding theme of today is about preparation, whichever side of the fence you're on. So yeah, we'll go into that in more detail. But the agenda for today, so we're going to look at what buyers really are looking at when they're acquiring a firm, the asset value versus share value. So what kind of a deal suits the vendor, or the firm as it stands. Indemnity, commission and clawback risks, culture and integration, and the systems and data migration needed. And we'll have a Q&A at the end as well, as I've said. So again, we'll try and cover off as much as we can, but we will try and finish on time at 1 o'clock. But should anybody need to stay on and want to ask more questions, I'm sure we can facilitate that. Okay. So the first question: if you had a magic wand, what's the perfect outcome? And I guess, Tom, you could ask that to both the acquirer and the acquiree. I guess they both have versions of that. But what's your experience of that? What are the common themes you see?
Yeah, I think it was a question that was taught to me actually by a chap who has been around the block, been involved in mergers and acquisitions for probably 30 years. And you're right, it's the question to both sides. And someone who's on the selling side mustn't assume that all acquirers are looking for the same thing, and that goes into valuing businesses in the same way. The reason I use this question always is when we're presented with someone who is looking to sell their business, is what are the main drivers here? And yes, price is going to play a part, but typically people say three things. Yes, they want a fair price for their life's hard work. They want their clients looked after in the manner that they have looked after them. People will have 20, 30, 40 year, we've got some with 50-year relationships. And these people they want to know comfortably that they can go to the golf club or down the high street and not bump into a client who is an embarrassing situation where there's been a bad outcome. And it's really, really important to have that empathy of someone going through that sale process and looking after that. And then obviously some firms, they'll have a team and they might be selling, but their team might not be ready to maybe retire at that point as well. And I think if people work with great staff members for many years, they generally care for them and want a really good outcome for them there as well. So it's really important to open that up and understand why someone is looking to sell their business, but also understand why from the other side someone's looking to buy the business as well. Just to give a bit of background on our side, we are we're not backed by any private equity. We're not debt funded. We have only done acquisitions where we have found synergies with retiring advisors who look at things in a similar fashion to how we do, and that really is an important starting block. Some people will want a much bigger business that they sell into, and some of the consolidators have done a really fantastic job. But some businesses will want to stay with a firm that's more similar to their size and how they've looked after clients. And so find those synergies early, I think is the really important part, and find where the common ground is. And these, as I say, are normally the three aspects that come out of it.
So some of the number of firms and the acquisitions that are happening in a minute, and the number of firms that may be coming available or may have a desire to sell, what are the main characteristics that immediately make a buyer want to engage in that? or look at that firm specifically? Are there specific markers? Is it just the AUM? Is it, is it the respect of that company and their profile?
I think you've got to go back. There's so many different reasons why people are on the acquisition trail. If you're a big consolidator and you've got a private equity backer, you can't hang around with that money not working hard for you. It's got to be put to use at speed. I can speak for ourselves. The reason we do it is we've had over a number of years some great connections who have been slightly older than us that we've known, and we've partnered with some of those to facilitate their retirements. And we don't have pressure to grow through acquisitions, but if the right partner could come along and it suits us, then we'll do it. So really, I think there is a lot of private equity. You can't get away from that. There is a lot of private equity money in this marketplace right now, and it is fueling. And now the private equity money is looking to exit. We only have to look at Evelyn Partners, NatWest buying that, and it fits in their stack with Coots at the top now. Evelyn and Partners, and I'm sure they will have their lighter touch service, hopefully. At the lower end of asset, and we've seen Barclays now coming in, with their proposition. So the banks are coming back to it. So it's really about understanding, if you're the seller, well, what am I selling into? Am I selling into a firm which is going to be looking to sell to a bank? Am I selling to a firm that is on the private equity backed and consolidation trail, and where's that going? Am I selling into a firm that is a local to your area and is just trying to grow their presence steadily? So I think those are really important questions, and some of them have some great outcomes. Yes, John.
But Tom, can I ask you a question? Are they looking for a CIP, a centralised proposition, and they can wander in and blithely switch everyone across to their own CIP?
That's interesting. I think that the FCA now are really starting to look at, I think there have in the past been contracts where there's conflicts of interest, to complete the deal. So, and I think the FCA are starting to really look at that. You may sell your business for £1 million, let's say, but if that contract says you are only going to get £1 million if every client is moved from platform A to platform B, and it's got to move from your investment proposition to our investment proposition, you've suddenly put the seller in a position where there is a conflict of interest here between great outcome and great advice for the client, and great outcome, great money for the seller. I think there's less and less of that now, because it's a conflict. Is it entirely been eradicated? I'm not sure. I just don't think that's a great outcome for clients. And to be honest, most acquisitions work well when it's a great outcome for clients.
But we have to guess what the private equity people in turn, when they're selling to NatWest or something, what are they saying? Oh, look at all these firms, we've accumulated them, we've gathered them all together, we've shut them all up in one place, and they're all going to do as they're told. Is that what they're going to say? Or
well, I think we've already seen some consolidators run into trouble already, because the playbook of PE in the consolidators is about scale and efficiencies, and if you can't bring those efficiencies in the timeframes you promised your backers, then the cost of capital starts to add up there. But there's some consolidators who are doing a fantastic job, and it doesn't mean that everything has to be in one bucket, does it? But it's under control, and I think that's where Consumer Duty has been fantastic at this point in time, where there is lots of consolidation going on, because you want that certainty of, if firms are being bought under one umbrella, and Mr. Smith in Birmingham and Mr. Jones in Norwich go and see the same firm, you want to get the same outcome in terms of what they were charged, and I think and what are the investment options and platforms, etc. So I think it has cleared it up. I think there's a lot more still to do, but the consolidators are actually doing a pretty good job, from what I understand. So yeah, but you know, if you're a seller and you've got a sensible proposition that's well managed, it doesn't necessarily have to be integratable to day one, because you know there is a process that has to go through that.
Excellent.
Pretty good.
Thank you. So it feeds in nicely to the next section, which is why the firms fail to achieve maximum value. So I'm sure there's many components to this, but we've highlighted a few that are the core. So maybe if you want to just walk us through a few of these, Tom, just to go through, you know, the issues that some sellers are facing, or the timeframes or the expectations on them, and why they're then not receiving, you know, maybe they're offered an amount that then reduces. So, you know, we've got, you know, I think this comes up quite a bit, but waiting until retirement and maybe leaving it too late seems to be a relatively common thing.
Yeah, well, I think just going back to what you said at the start, Charlie, when you get a call and someone says, "Oh, I've sold," really sort of shows me that they've not partnered in the way that we would love to see firms partner with their compliance and their back office systems, because you play such an important role in data. And so if someone's looking to sell, I would have expected them to have gone to their providers and say, you know, have I got everything in best of shape? I'm looking to do this in a few years' time. And that comes, you know, the first point, Jason, you put up here, waiting until retirement. You don't want, you know, your life's work to become a fast sale or a distressed asset because you've left it too late. You know, to organize these things, some things can't be rewound. You need time to do them, or you've got to accept your business will have a lesser value against it because you haven't done certain things every single year. It's not like you can identify certain problems and go back and rectify them. If they've happened and they've not been a good enough standard, then it will just have a devaluation on what you receive. So, you know, I think really good outcomes. We purchased a firm earlier this year, and I'd say from day one of that person having that firm, it was ready to be purchased, not because that was their intention, but they had the data there. They knew that at some point they would want to retire and walk away, and so everything from day one they'd done in their business was you know, done at a really high standard. Your second point here is poor client data. I mean, you've said the FCA are after data now. The best valuations are going to be when the data comes through very quickly, it's very clean, and it answers the questions that are going to need to be answered. And you get several layers of that data. You know, to get a valuation on the table is fairly easy, but a sensible valuation. You know, there will be some firms who will just tell you the valuation without even understanding your business, really, and they will base that off, well, tell me what the recurring income is, and we'll give you a headline figure. I think I've said this to you before. I call that the fish and chip deal, where they'll give you go fishing with a really big number, but you can be, you know, pretty sure that they will chip away at it as the deal drags on, and that's not what a seller wants to see. You know, you want to be presented with a number and achieve that number.
Yeah. And are these the elements on here? Are these also reasons? Charlie may know more from IFAC as well, but are these also reasons why deals will just fail? As in, once the layers are peeled back, depending on what you find, you know, how bad has it got to be before you go, actually, this isn't for us? Well,
I mean, yeah, the next point you've got there is unclear recurring income. If someone turns up and says, no, well, you know, I've got this recurring income, is my value based on 3, 4 times, 5 times that recurring income? Well, that's fine to start a discussion, but if you can't prove that figure very, very quickly and sensibly, and the data's there, then you've already got your first stumbling block, because no one is buying a business without the proof of the pudding being there and handing over their money. So, you know, your systems, recurring income evidence, whether it's coming through monthly, quarterly, annually, you know, the annual payments from some of the providers can get missed, but they are still a recurring income. It's just a longer recurring income, aren't they there? So the missing review evidence, I think, is been one that's been highlighted, obviously, with the consultations and reviews that have been done recently, and that's one way you can't undo it. You know, that there are firms who have looked after their clients brilliantly, but for whatever reason, they might not have seen some clients for 1 or 2 or 3 years. And there might be really good reasons the clients were happy not to be seen, but they've not evidenced it. And it's too late to be in the position of, oh, I'm selling my business. And then someone says, well, you haven't evidenced this. And they go, oh, well, I'll write it up now. You know, you've missed it. And that was my point about if you've not been doing some of these things, you can't go back and rectify it. You can't show up. Or if you go back, you've got to really document that while you're making the note in 2026 about something that happened in 2023. So,
as an old bank manager, the auditors used to have saying, if the ink is wet when I turn up, he may as well close the door.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and look, consumer duty gaps, I mean, you know, it's going to depend on whether you're doing a share purchase, and we'll come on to that, or an asset purchase on some of those gaps.
Absolutely. So leading into, again, the price, we all understand that the price will be the main leader for wanting to sell, typically, i.e., you know, the need to come out of the business for whatever reason. But what does a buyer typically want to look at in terms of the granular level of detail? Again, like, it effectively can be treated like an audit. In a way, it's an audit of value, isn't it? So, I mean, these are some of the core ones that we've listed out that we know go through the process. But are there any that are, you know, absolute priorities for you when you're going for an acquisition?
So I think we would start at the high level to really get a sensible valuation on the table to start with, and that is there's several things of information that we want to know quite quickly. And the first will be number of clients, but we also then want it actually broken down into households. Only because of our business, we look after households rather than individual clients. Then we're into the age of those people. You know, if the average age of a client bank is 75 plus, it's going to have a lower valuation than if the average age is in their 50s. You know, the reality is there's just not that time frame statistically of the recurring income. For us, location, you know, we have one office, we're based in central London. If we find out that all of the clients are dotted around the country, for us, that's not ideal. But again, if you're selling into a consolidator who's got hubs and offices, that's not an issue. We like to see whether meetings are done in person, in the office, or online. So these are kind of things. Then we get into platform, you know, what platforms are people using? Is it very tidy so that you can clearly see that they have obviously had really good platform due diligence through their business, and you know there's clear reasons why platforms have been used, or is it, you know, there's 10 different platforms in this client bank, and you start to sort of ask questions there. Then we're into investment propositions, or product structure. Actually, you know, is this predominantly pension led, advice led, protection business? You know, you've got to understand what makes up that, and the recurring income nature, ongoing fees, etc. there. And once you're through that, you've got your initial valuation. Then, you know, let's say we've gone through heads of terms and we've agreed where we're heading, and you're into exclusivity. Then you've into your deeper due diligence, and that's the bit, in my experience, that has shocked sellers of the hard work that's there. The ones who have put all of this together and had it ready can really give the important information quite quickly. The ones who haven't, it's a real shock how detailed it has to be now. Very different, as you said, Charlie, to what it used to be like. And that's where things like the compliance history, the technology stack, you know, those things are important.
Well, I also, you know, I assume that for the, you know, if not 99% or more, then it must be their first experience of going through an acquisition. So it isn't something you're well and practiced in. It's, and or if you've never acquired another company, this is the first time. So, you know, we'll come into this in more detail in a second about the surprises that people face or were not expecting the request for. So, I mean, the big question again is, you know, how we've covered off a lot of this already, but in terms of, you know, how much should people expect to receive or offer when acquiring a company? I know there are, the metrics that we have, for instance, on here, just basic ones really, but I'm not sure if you want to just walk through these expectations or are these.
Well, this was a slide that I put together actually, and
yeah.
it's an old method which I used to use years ago. And so what I used to do is take an average of all the above to value people's businesses in the main when requested, and we had a fair amount of traffic that way once. And so you simply run through these metrics and then average them all out afterwards. And weirdly, you get a really, you get a sort of, it's quite accurate. It's sort of, it was a surprise to me the first time I did it. And every time you look at a business, you think, instinctively, this is what you'd pay. It came out at, roughly speaking, the same number. So funds under management, 3% of that. I think the high watermark was when Prudential bought M&G. I think they paid 10% of their entire funds under management at the time. That was in the year 2000. Sold it for a lot less, actually, quite recently. Less of a percentage, more money, but less as a proportion of the funds under management. But that was based on if you're taking 0.5% per annum from the funds. I suppose it's 20 times that, so 20 times your earnings. Renewal 3 times trail, 1.5 times gross revenue. There's number of staff, because you've got to be aware that if you want to get the best staff in your business, acquiring them is the easiest way of recruiting them, really. Particularly IFAs, particularly ones who don't sit there reading, looking for jobs every day. 15 times profit, that's an old metric. 15 times price earnings, average revenue, and client bank. So that's, and then you average them all out afterwards. So that was my slide. Do you use something similar to that, Tom?
Yeah, I think as a starting point, we never make an offer from a conversation. We always ask for a anonymized data set of every client, every product they've got. So all of that information there. So you're building up this data set of the clients, the age, the location, the platform, the product, the investment proposition, and what the servicing fee is. Simplest form.
So really, you're saying, if you take off all your clothes, I'll tell you whether I want to get into bed with you. But I want you to tell me everything about your business first. Is that a very crude way of putting it?
I think
you're talking to somebody who's pretty sensitive, if you know what I mean, and might be going, well, hang on, mate, you just tell me what you're going to pay me.
Well, I mean, you can start with, ultimately, I think that's where a lot of people might be getting led down the garden path, because, we can all throw out a big number, and then I come back to the fish and chip, and of course, if you're looking to sell your life's work and someone's telling you, well, let's do it on recurring income, and I'm going to pay you 5 times recurring income, you start to do those multiples. You go, well, I'm pretty excited about that number. And so that's the number that I said ticked off. And if someone then says, oh, by the way, we're going to look after your clients in exactly the way you want them. Okay, that's the second one ticked off. And so you're into heads of terms quite quickly, quite excited before actually taking a step back there. And, suddenly this person just made me an offer based off no information on my business. And what you tend to happen, and I have seen this with quite a few people, is they're into the consolidators. Typically their process. It's a acquisition manager whose job is to go and get as many potential purchasers. Now, if you're a 1 or a 2 person IFA practice, you put a lot of work to get to this point. What you might not have realized is you are just in a pool of other businesses like yours that you will work hard for a year to get this deal done. And actually no decision maker has actually seen your business. And you're still being led on that 5 times, 4 times multiple, that they know nothing about your business yet. So Charlie, you're absolutely right. We go, look, you're going to show us your data without us knowing who the clients are or anything like that. So we can really give an accurate valuation on this and form it there. We always say to everybody, we will not offer you the most. but we might end up actually paying you the most. And I think, that's trying to highlight that position. Throwing out a big number to get people excited is a great way to capture them and get them into exclusivity. But I personally wouldn't like to operate with a reputation like that. I much prefer to have a bit of detail and give someone a number that we really feel we can attach ourselves to, and we're not going to have to chip away at it once we get into the due diligence and the exclusivity period and go, oh, okay, actually all your clients are a bit old, or your platforms are a bit messy, or this or that. Far rather start with.
You could say that the true potential 8% of your funds under management offer, which sort of fell, but the regulator didn't like it, and I think there's been a bit of back chat about the end results. I think that might have flushed out those who were going for headline numbers.
Yeah, but I think ultimately you're never going to know the true offer that's going to be on the piece of paper until you've got to be open. There's someone, if they're buying your business, they've got to look at it. You don't buy something blind, so you've got to go and look at it. So you might as well get an offer that's actually based on your business, rather than having a number that's just based on, might be the best business that's out there that gives you the biggest multiple.
Excellent. And in terms of the purchase itself, so these are, the two variants you would normally go with. So asset versus share. There's some pros and cons, or I guess that, so in your experience, not what do you do more of, it depends on the firm you're acquiring, obviously, and their desires, or needs. So if you just want to walk us through some of the variances in the two and how it could benefit, maybe a smaller IFA firm.
Yeah, well, I think my advice to anyone when they're selling is to actually engage with the people around you who already have experience. So, using people like Charlie to speak to. Charlie will make sure that a seller has a good solicitor. It's amazing how many people want to sell their business and have never even engaged with a solicitor or a lawyer who's actually got experience of doing this. Using a solicitor because you've known them for years and they say, oh yeah, I've been dealt with mergers and acquisitions for years. You've got to use someone who is sector specific and got a track record in it. That would be my biggest advice, because you can be sure that the acquirer is using someone with sector specific knowledge, and you don't want to put yourself on the back foot as a seller already using someone who's not got the sector specific knowledge. So that would be my first place, because that's going to help you in understanding what's going to be best, and your accountant. And the accountant will walk the seller through, well, what's going to be best. Somebody might be a sole trader, well, they don't have the option of doing a share purchase, selling for a share, their shares. So they're forced into an asset purchase. We do both. Quite frankly, we can operate whichever model. Ultimately, you want to leave as much money on the table for the seller. And what I mean by that is, so you're trying to use the most efficient route for them. But also sometimes things that start out as share purchases, which we'll come on to, end up being an asset purchase because the buyer cannot accept some of the liabilities that maybe sit in the business because it wasn't run as efficiently, or the data's not there. There's just the liabilities that they don't want to take on. I personally don't think you should do an asset purchase if you think that there are those liabilities that even sit just within a share purchase, because you should be buying a business because you like the business. But so both routes, and it's really about understanding it from an accounting point of view, what's going to be best for you as a seller, and get a good accountant. But my biggest advice is get a solicitor who has sector experience already. It just will serve you multiples. You shouldn't be afraid of paying their fees to get a great job done.
I'm sure Robert will put a thumbs up to that one in the call.
It's just such an important, having witnessed so many, not that of us buying them, but other people as well. And I often get asked who's a good solicitor to use, and I think it's really important that they've got sector specific knowledge.
And obviously we've got a diagram here of what the various structures will mean to both sides, but in terms of staff continuity, like going back to the three pillars that you had, the the staff continuity, the client continuity, and the price. You know, there's pros and cons, I guess, to each. But
I think what I would say is there's lots of brokers working in the market, and I think brokers can play a really important role in the sale process. Sometimes I don't think they've had a robust enough conversation with the seller. You know, someone with not enough money under management to make it efficient for the buyer to do a share purchase is just a really frank conversation. A share purchase costs the buyer an awful lot more to do. The level of due diligence that they've got to go through, the time it takes, and so therefore that cost has to be, you know, the size of the business being bought has to match that cost. And, you know, unfortunately, sometimes there will be sellers out there who their accountants have told them it is most efficient to do a share sale, and their accountant doesn't have sector specific knowledge, and a lawyer may turn around and go, well, yeah, that is the most efficient, but you are not going to get someone who will buy you at the same multiple as an asset purchase because of the cost involved and the size of your business. So you're basically going to end up, even if you do go down a share purchase, you're going to end up with a lower valuation because the business just can't carry the cost of that. So yeah, understanding what's route for you, and accepting that, you know, the size of your business might not be sometimes big enough to warrant a share purchase. Yeah,
very good. And again, data is going to be one of the overriding features of the whole process today. But you know, the value of data, the quality, as in the quality of the data, and not just the volume of it. You know, I think you mentioned earlier on about the different platforms that people have data in, and to us, when we speak to clients, that can go anywhere from, you know, pen and paper written with a quill to up in my head to Excel, Word, that CRM, that system, and you can get up, you know, if you can count everything, there's 8 or 9 systems, depending on how they're logging complaints and breaches through to promotions, through to, you know, the sales KPIs and everything. So it's very, very, very difficult, depending on the firm, I guess, to draw that data together into a coherent picture of the firm to assist with evaluation. But I think there's obvious points here. But, you know, in terms of having the good data, or having your data housed well, cleaned, and, you know, efficiently placed, you know, reportable effectively to an acquiring company, you know, that I guess you look at all these benefits from, you know, there's a lower buy risk, therefore there's a higher appetite maybe to acquire them. You might receive better offers financially, and I think ultimately there's also that, I think the clients benefit as well in the long term, pre and post. So if the clients are being well looked after with good data sets as well, you're more aware of the needs, you're doing probably better, more efficient annual reviews, and you're aware of the needs more. And the poor data, again, you know, you are probably going to look at a reduced valuation and delays in the process, I guess.
And that's where, as I said, the reason we put out sort of a valuation template to anyone we're looking to purchase is I'm doing that on a sort of data cleanliness, how organized it is test. If that can be turned around back to me in under a week, you know, you've got a business who knows their data, they can pull it around, and then you're looking, you know, the integratability of it. One of my first places to go to, I know any members of BAT and IFAC, you know, is the annual audits, and I'm looking for, let's find out, everybody will have things that they can improve upon, but have they improved upon these? And, you know, the audits will go into these areas, and that's, you know, it really important. And ultimately, you know, I saw a firm a few years ago, and I always ask in the first conversation is, you know, what back office systems do you use? Well, they turned around and pointed still at their filing cabinets. That's already quite an issue, because we don't have paper in our office, and they've got a filing cabinet. So you're already, it might have been a great business, but that's already, you've got an integratability issue. What are their risk systems for risk profiling? You know, all of these things, is the closer you can find, the more synergies you can find. Out they don't have to be perfect, but you don't want to be miles away. And that's, again, if you're a seller, you've got to think through on that. If I'm selling into a business and they still want me to work for them, and you want to work, and you get up to speed with their systems, and do you want to? Or are they using, let's just use IO as a back office system as an example. Oh, if two firms already use it, you're going to have some working knowledge of it, and the integratability there is going to be useful. So having this data in formats like in BAT and other areas, it can be manipulated because you've got the data. It can be used. It doesn't have to be the same system, but you've got to have the raw data to be able to use it.
And I guess that's as a result. I mean, you could argue it is a result of the culture of that firm about their desire to digitally transform, if that's what they needed to do, and what systems they're using, whether it's AI or just a standard CRM or both or whatever. But this is something you look into, the culture of the firm, isn't it? Quite deeply, really.
It's so important, isn't it? I mean, great culture will lead to great client outcomes. Happy advisors, happy support staff sounds slightly cringy, but there'll be great client outcomes because they care about the people, and we all, hopefully all care about the people we're looking after. But if data is amiss, and things like, can you pull off the vulnerability checks of every single client that you're about to try and sell? And those are really important things. The FCA wants to know these things, and any buyer will want to know about the vulnerability of every client that they're buying. If you can't pull that data, it's going to become that's what I talked to. It's a lot of hard work if you've not been logging it as you go. And these are things that then unfortunately lead to a lesser valuation there. And as you've put here, a great deal is where both sides are really happy, and what that means usually is very little client attrition. And that's key to all deals. It's all based around clients being looked after, which means little client attrition, and that will lead to great client outcome and a good deal ultimately.
Yeah, and this is part of it as well. Obviously, I think the preparation and the post completion work that you need to do, and it's the analogy of you've got to change the engine without stopping the car, because you don't want to lose clients, you don't want to lose confidence and reputation or value, certainly. So it's relatively high. Well, it's very high risk, I guess, in a lot of cases. But in terms of some of your knowledge and understanding of the firm, I think we've made points on there around understanding what the owner's intentions are, what the staff's intentions are, have you in any way been able to gauge the client's reaction to an acquisition? These are very, very sensitive points, aren't they?
I think, and that's why I go back to, you've got to understand who you're selling into, and what journey they are on. The reason I think it's so important is, and I'll give an example. If you're selling into a really good firm that's a consolidator, but the PE money has been there for 5, 6, 7 years already, there is likelihood that PE firm is wanting to exit that position. Now, it might mean another PE firm's coming in, or it might mean there's going to be another sale. Now, I suppose the flip side of that coin is they'd say, oh yeah, but it's not going to affect the client outcome. But if you put yourself back in the seller's shoes, if I've just spent a year of time preparing to sell my firm into a firm, and I've told all of my clients why it's such a good firm that I'm selling into, and I've done my due diligence on them, and I'm really happy with them, and you've got your deal, let's say, is going to take 3 years to pay out, and in another year's time, so you do the deal, and in another year's time, the firm you've sold to sells, what's the client at the end of the day going to be thinking? I mean, the risk of attrition goes up. Now, if you lose a load of clients a year after you've retired and you've sold, but you're still waiting for your money out of that, the risk increases and increases. So that's where I really think sellers really need to sort of dig into who they're selling to and what journey that person is on first, and that's fundamental.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking into indemnity commission and why it's a challenge, so that why does it create complexity? Why is it such a big consideration for you?
If a business has been set up and it has a track record of non-indemnity, then acquirers will consider it as a recurring income in the same fashion of multiples that they would of, let's say, fund asset under advice. Where it's been switched from indemnity to non-indemnity, in the last couple of years, it will probably just be written out of the deal effectively from a valuation point of view. So it really goes back to track record and showing that it looks like it's recurring in nature. So if a firm's been brilliant at protection business for the last 10 years or longer, and they might have been taking it as in indemnity, but they can show the real track record of that business, then they've obviously got something that works really well. And I think any buyer would look at that sensibly. Where it's difficult is if the seller is going, no, look at my income, but a lot of it is indemnity commission, and you're trying to buy that business. Well, there's potentially clawbacks to come still. So,
yeah, can I just say that is quite hard to spot though, because it doesn't show up on the accounts. I mean, you have to reserve 2.5%, I think, of the indemnity total. So if all your policies cancelled on the following day after the sale, and there's 100,000 of liability, there's only 2,500 showing as debt or as a creditor on the balance sheet. Quite a clever way. I mean, it's a hidden liability, really.
Well, that's I think that's where the due diligence, Charlie's got to dig deeper than just what's going on the balance sheet and the P&L. You've got to be into what cases have been put in your new business register. What's potentially coming back, and you have to, from a due diligence point of view, dig right into it, because of course as a buyer you've got to know your total exposure to that. You have to, and that total exposure is ultimately going to be passed on to the seller until.
It's still quite hard to spot it though. I mean, you could work on non-indemnity, and then 2 years before you sell, just switch everything to indemnity, and suddenly your income just shoots up. It's in the last 2 years. It's not. I mean, it is. Eventually you get to it, and
that's why I say that's why there's most buyers aren't particularly interested in putting a value to it.
I thought you just said they'll pay the same as funds.
If you've got the track record, if you've got the longer term track record of it being consistent, ultimately like a recurring income.
I mean, some of the old IFAs, and I think you can still do it on the quotes. We don't often see it, just add. So you have the same level of commission all the way through the life of the policy, a 20-year policy or something. You just add. You have level commission. You very rarely see it, but some of the old brokers used to do that. But it's hard to see getting any reward for it, if you know what I mean. It was nice to build in the renewal commission, but after 4 years, yes, a lot of other brokers just go back after 4 years and find something cheaper, which isn't sounds like churning, but actually the life rates have gone down over the pro rata gone down over the years. So in fact, that would have been a good strategy as well for a time.
Yeah, but that kind of feeds into this as well, Charlie. So, I guess a major consideration that you would find exceptionally hard to quantify is, the client reaction, and or their, as you say, you want to limit the attrition as much as you can. So what can you do, or is there a checklist of do's and don'ts maybe of, to try and, make it a successful transition and as painless as possible? But even, to this degree of, the client shouldn't even notice that it's happened, I guess, is the ideal.
Yeah, from a service point of view, definitely. I think that's a great, the client hasn't got to be worried. I think I always remind sellers when they're going through the process, you go through the excitement of getting the offer and going through the due diligence, and it's hard work, and getting the legals all agreed, and you get to completion, and I think there's a big sigh of relief from a seller, and we're sort of going, well, actually no, the hard work's going to start here really, and that process between getting to completion and actually then the proof being in the pudding is really clear communication with the clients. And I think I've always tried to remind sellers that this really is just like any other recommendation that you're going to make. If the seller is going to be retiring, you will have had these clients for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and they have followed your great recommendations and done a good job for them. they will have expected you as the seller to have gone through the same sort of due diligence that you would have done by choosing their platform or their underlying investments. They'll have expected their advisor to have looked at a number of firms that they're potentially selling to and have chosen the one that they think is best fit for their clients. And I think clients generally will believe the recommendation ultimately that the retiring advisor or the selling advisor goes, actually, I've done all of that and I believe this firm is the right fit for you. We're really fortunate that the retiring advisors often become clients of ours as well, which is really great endorsement for us. They want to go off and actually enjoy their time away, and I think it's a great endorsement to the clients as well for the retiring advisor to say, look, I'm really happy with them and I've actually got them looking after what I do, even though I could in theory do it myself, but the world moves fast, and if you want to enjoy your retirement, you might not want to keep up so much up to speed with the pension rule regulations changing.
Okay, so we've got 7 minutes left and 7 or 8 slides at the current rate of progress. We'll be in 90 minutes in. So if anyone's got any questions, now's the time, because we always finish on time. That's something I'm very keen on. So by all means, put your questions in now, maybe in the chat, given the time spent.
And again, you can always come to us afterwards as well. You can find us on batsoftware.co.uk and we can forward messages to Tom, unless he's happy to put his email on here. But something in terms of going back to the data, the legacy systems being a threat to the deal potentially, Tom, with missing information, lack of quality information, limited export availability, i.e. pen and paper and other systems.
Yeah, I wouldn't start going and changing, necessarily legacy systems for more updated systems if you're getting close to that sale process a year or two away, but I'd make sure it's the cleanliness of the data. Having the data is so important, and using systems like that you offer so important, and start working with people like IFAC and BAT to get that data up to speed. Basically, it's going to add the value to the business.
Absolutely. And so, what surprises the sellers have you found in terms of requests for information? Are there things that they just weren't expecting you to look into, or
not looking into? I think it's the depth of due diligence. If you're doing a share purchase, the level, we're going to have lawyers who are doing full due diligence processes. If you're a 1 or 2 person IFA practice and you haven't engaged with solicitors, you've got an awful lot of work that you're going to be doing that you're not maybe expected. And if you've not got it all ready, then it's hard to go and find all of this stuff. But some businesses have great data rooms where it all sits and they can pull it off pretty quickly. And you ultimately provide a data room. No one's buying your business if they haven't looked at every single thing that they want to look at.
Yeah, and we said this wasn't a sales part of it, but obviously I have to point out that all of those are within BAT. So if you're using BAT effectively and fully, you'd be pretty well covered. So there's my plug. So just coming to the end then. So in terms of do's and don'ts for selling advice firms, sort of the buyers, are there any on here that stick out to you as that, please do that? We've covered data pretty extensively, but are there any others that you feel are really important?
I think I said, I engage with people who've been through it before. This is, you normally only sell your business hopefully once, and engage with people who've probably done it before, had experience, meet and discuss with some solicitors who are sector specific as well. And the journey can be much easier if you can pull on people's past experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Jerry Springer, final thoughts time. In terms of key takeaways from today, again, we're trying to cram a lot into an hour. So again, if you have questions, you can come through to us and we can respond as quickly as we can. But I think data quality is the main driver here. The culture, I think, is the overriding part of that. That how seriously do you take your data? How clean is your data? What do you really want for your clients and your staff afterwards? I think there's the preparation. I think, as you've said, Tom, leaving this a year or two beforehand is too late. You need as good as a 5-year plan, would you say, to to line yourself up for this and prepare for it?
I think, you know, I mean, the further out you can prepare, the better prepared you're likely to be. And as I said, that last bit is understanding who are giving you the offers, what journey they're on, and is it going to be acceptable for you selling your clients and hard work into that?
Absolutely. Okay. Do we have any questions? I know, Charlie, that you just responded.
Yeah, Rob asked for the due diligence questions, which every firm has their own. In fact, was send you the IFAC one. The generally it follows an audit, an external audit, and certainly IFAC have done quite a few audits based on, you know, could you audit this firm so that for our due diligence, so to speak. Sometimes with an edge to it of you know, we've already decided to go ahead, now we need to do the auditing or to double check on it, but our investors want to see that we've done due diligence, and that's come up once or twice. But yes, no, it's and it's certainly been a shock for the 2 or 3 firms who have come back to us saying, well, we failed the due diligence. That's been a real shock. File checking, it probably is the most important thing, and having some sort of centralized system, which they're not really using as they should. And we can gather, which is natural when you come from a small business. As you grow, it is natural to think, oh well, we can cobble the data together. If you ask us a question, we'll cobble it together for you. Sort of doesn't quite cut it anymore. It's got to be, it's there. Oh yes, it's here right now, all on the system, so to speak.
Yeah,
good. Okay, so that's pretty much it for today. Thanks for joining us. And again, if you do have any queries, come straight through to us. You can find us on the BAT website, and we can pass you on to Tom if need be. But
Yes,
otherwise,
I think you're available on a Google, aren't you, Tom? Menenti. Tom,
yeah, absolutely. If people want to, get in contact and or have a conversation, then more than happy to catch up after this.